Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a well known and respected professional from the world of finance and fintech from Kochi in India, Mr. Vineet Mohan. Vineet, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashutosh. Very kind introduction and words. It's
Thank
an
you.
honor to be on the show. So thank you
Thank
for
you.
having me.
Thank you. Vineet is the co founder and chief executive officer of FastTrackr AI, which is an AI led platform purpose built for the US wealth management industry. So, Vineet, my first question, you have lived and worked across the US, UK, Scotland, and Hong Kong during your 14-year leadership journey at HSBC. Which experience shaped you the most and why?
Sure. Yeah, I'm kind of jogging down memory lane here. I was very fortunate. I grew up in India, spent most of my time here for my education, and then joined HSBC's leadership program. So HSBC has this very interesting leadership program called the International Management Program.
Yeah,
So we're a group of 200 people, and the idea is every 2 or 3 years, you take on a different leadership role in a different part of the world. So I was
correct.
very fortunate to live and work in different parts of the world. And every experience kind of shapes you in some way or the other. I think, firstly, of course, the cultural aspects, how you realize that people are different and yet very much the same.
Hmm.
And also personally, I think you learn how to adapt better and engage, with people that are a bit different from you. And as I said, HSBC, also the journey was very interesting because with every move, I got to kind of come across a different leadership and business challenge,
Hmm.
which also kind of sets you up professionally.
Hmm.
Looking back, I think you mentioned Scotland there. I think that was probably a very pivotal, 3 years.
Hmm.
Uh, Firstly, personally, because we were in the US and we moved to Edinburgh in Scotland, a beautiful place,
Yeah.
bang in the middle of COVID with a 1-year-old. So we go into a place that, I've lived in the UK before, but never in Edinburgh. So it was a new place. But you move into a country where a city where you don't know anyone, and you are facing a 6-month lockdown where you're kind of sat at home with
Yeah.
your family. So personally, also it was kind of a challenging experience, but also the role itself was very interesting, but also challenging. So HSBC up until then, for its payments business, Europe and UK obviously is our headquarters. It was very kind of decentralized. So we had people in client-facing roles, specifically client management
Hmm.
across the different markets. And my remit was to go and build out a brand new function to centralize the entire European operation onshore in Edinburgh and
Hmm.
offshore in India, which meant we had to kind of, bring on board hundreds of new folks,
Yeah.
both in the country and outside. And obviously, when you're building out a brand new team and that kind of scale, ideally you want to do it in person. The team comes in, everybody learns from each other. Also,
Hmm.
when you bring in a lot of people, you want to make sure that the culture is set from day one.
Correct.
And obviously, we could do none of that because it was COVID, everything was on Zoom. So that was a massive experience in itself.
Hmm.
Also, myself and the rest of the immediate leadership team, we decided that let's take a different approach rather than just hiring folks with financial services experience. We hired a lot of people from diverse backgrounds, speaking different
Hmm.
languages from different countries, but also from different professional backgrounds.
Hmm.
And that made a massive difference in how we ran the function. And within 5, 6 months, we were up and running. The team was engaging with thousands of clients and projects
Hmm.
on a daily basis. So massive experience in terms of how diversity, helps when running a business. How adversity is not something that you can definitely overcome
Yeah.
with the right sort of people and the
Hmm.
right attitude. So I'd say in a way, probably one of the most pivotal
Hmm.
roles
Hmm.
in my
Hmm.
journey.
Fascinating. Fascinating. Looking back, which personal or professional turning point pushed you towards becoming a founder yourself?
Sure, sure. No, that's a very interesting question. So I think from a very young age, growing up in 90s in India and the early 2000s in my education, actually I always had this kind of a thing that I want to build and become an entrepreneur. And
Hmm.
in fact, I remember talking to several college mates, early, colleagues about building something. But somehow maybe the time wasn't right, maybe I was not ready, and the
Mm.
ecosystem wasn't as mature
Correct.
in India as well, right? At that point, the startup ecosystem is what I mean. And and vicariously, that's kind of how I started investing in startups.
Mm.
Like I thought, let's vicariously be part of the ecosystem.
Mm. Mm.
So with a couple of friends, I started investing in companies more than 10 years back
Mm.
as an angel investor. And also, I realized that of the many roles that I did in HSBC, looking back, the ones that gave me the most joy and satisfaction were the ones where I was building something from the ground up.
Mm.
So obviously, I talked about what I did in Edinburgh, but I had similar roles where I set up the kind of fintech partnerships
Mm.
business for the bank in the West Coast of the US. I set up the first corporate banking learning and development academy globally for the bank. So all these experiences really kind of reinforced that I enjoy that, and when the moment was right, after I kind of moved on from HSBC and moved back to India,
Mm.
it made sense to kind of think about building,
Amazing.
and that's how FastTrackr started.
Absolutely. So let's come to FastTrackr AI. Tell me, what is the core problem in the US wealth management industry that you have set out to solve?
Sure. So firstly, like any vertical within financial services in the US, wealth management is massive, right? It's massive for a reason, right? All the wealth
Correct.
got generated and accumulated post the world wars, and towards the back end of the last century is when people started looking for advice, right? As the people who generated the wealth started getting into their kind of retirement age, and financial advisory as an industry really started booming.
Mm.
So today it's a massive industry. There's hundreds of trillions of dollars that's
Yeah.
managed by these advisors, and the numbers are massive as well. So there's close to 1 million people employed in the industry, either as advisors or as support
Mm.
staff. And yet it's very fragmented. Firstly, the people who are in the industry, the business models really vary. Some have independent wealth shops. There's 30,000 of those.
Mm.
And then some work for broker dealers where the commercial model is slightly different. And some work for very large banks. And, each one works with their clients in a slightly different way. So it's fragmented from that standpoint.
Mm.
And even the tech stack, the way it's evolved, even with the kind of SaaS era, every firm ends up working with around 5 to 20 different software tools, which don't necessarily talk to each other.
Mm.
And for a good reason as well, because wealth management is quite complex in the US. We
Yeah.
often think about wealth management as investments and money management, but there's a lot more to it. There's tax
Mm.
strategies,
Yeah.
there's estate planning, there's education planning, and there's been all these different types of software that come
Yeah.
in and help you with specific niches. Um, so that was one big reason for the fragmentation.
Mm.
But also, as we peel the onion a lot more, we realize that the industry is very manual in everything that it does, from how it manages
Mm.
meetings to how it analyzes different documents to how it collects data, validates data, enters data. And up until now, while there were ways to optimize some of that through workflows, technology wasn't really at a place where it could start automating it meaningfully.
Mm.
Um, and that led us to sowing the seeds for FastTrackr, where our vision, like you said earlier, is to build a platform that automates a lot of these
Mm.
operational
Mm.
workflows where people spend a lot of time
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And why do you think this problem has been underserved for so long, despite the size of the wealth management industry that you just told me about?
It is. I think underserved is probably fair at some level
Mm.
because, like I said, technology was never ripe enough to solve some of the problems that can be solved today. Right. For example, a
Mm.
lot of the earlier technology was around. If you look at RPA, etc., it was very much rule based, right?
Mm.
Rather than it, technology couldn't understand context, take action. A lot of the systems that are in use previously are systems of record rather than
Mm.
systems of action.
Right.
So you'll have a CRM, a financial planning tool, a portfolio management software, all housing some data about your client,
Mm.
but the data might be slightly different, which in this world is not good enough.
Correct.
So humans have to make sure that they are in sync, they make sense to the custodians, to the clients,
Mm.
etc.
Mm.
And there have been players who've tried to consolidate some of this, try and create one-stop shops. But the level of success has varied quite a bit
Mm.
because of how specialized the
Correct.
industry is.
Correct. So, can you, for my viewers and listeners, and for me, walk us through a real example of how a registered investment advisor uses FastTrackr on a typical day?
Yeah, would love to. That's core to what we're solving for. And yeah, I mean, let's take the example of an RIA, anywhere in the country, in the US. It starts with, advisors and advisory teams spend most of the time every week talking to clients, right? So FastTrackr is a platform that works alongside them.
Yeah.
Before the week, if you have 5 or 6 or how many ever meetings, it prepares you for those meetings by preparing very nuanced briefings about who you're meeting based on past interactions. Post the meetings, it will automate a lot of the follow-up action items where people spend a lot of time. So, for example, preparing notes, identifying action items, following up on those action items, drafting a follow-up email. So it automates that entire workflow. Secondly, in this industry, advisory teams have to work with a lot of unstructured and structured documents. So think brokerage statements, tax forms, etc., wherein you get those documents from your clients or prospects, and someone's going through these multi-page documents manually to firstly extract information, then enrich, etc. Instead of someone doing that manually, FastTrackr automates that whole process. You can upload these documents. It understands the type of documents. It'll extract, enrich, help you generate proposals and insights, which you can then take back to your client or prospect in a faster way. And the other cool, use case is, everyone wants to bring on board their clients sooner, right? And typically what happens is you talk to a prospect multiple times. And then after you shake hands is when you send a blank intake form saying, hey, I need these 120 data points from you to help me open all these accounts for you, create a financial plan for you, and so on and so forth. The good thing with FastTrack and AI in general is if you've had multiple interactions with that person already, and you've received a bunch of documents from them, from the get-go, we start creating and enriching that master plan profile. So at the time of onboarding, you're not going to them with a blank intake form. You're going in with a form asking them to fill out what is missing and validate what is already there. Like, middle names might be slightly spelled inaccurately, et cetera, et cetera. And once it comes back, once the data comes back from the client, we also then automate that whole process around how it goes into account opening documents, how it goes into the rest of your tech stack. So these are some of the common ways that advisory teams and RIAs are using FastTrackr today.
But tell me, what are some of the most common tasks advisors would want to automate first or immediately?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the industry itself, this might seem generic at this point, but the meeting assistant is a massive use case, right? People are immediately seeing. The good thing about AI is everyone can see it and believe it, right? You've seen ChatGPT, you can use it in your personal life. So people get over the curve a bit, earlier than perhaps other technologies. But I think in terms of where we're seeing maximum usage and where people spend a lot of time is stuff like this: meeting workflows, handling unstructured data, handling documents, data gathering, data entry. On the marketing side, content generation, outreach, and also personalizing some of them. See, before you had intelligent technology, a lot of this was very generic. The same content goes to every single client or prospect of yours. And from what we've seen and industry research, today people are spending 25-30% of their work week on admin tasks, not engaging with clients. So these things are taken off their book of work, then it opens up time to kind of engage more with clients or engage with more clients, etc.
Very interesting. How do small advisory firms react differently from large multi-advisor practices when they first see your product?
So one thing is, like I said earlier, obviously every advisor and decision maker is different in terms of how they approach technology, right? The good thing with AI, it's easy to convince someone that it can it can add a lot of value to you, and you can see it in your personal life too. People have started using chat. I mean, a lot of firms might say don't use ChatGPT, but the truth of the matter is, people on their teams are using it.
Absolutely,
right? And they are kind of making the case for how do we bring in AI? If you look at differentiation between small and large firms, the good thing is whoever invests in technology in general, not just AI, and in a structured fashion, they see a lot more growth in AUM, which is the key metric in the industry, compared to others. In our experience, when you talk to small firms, the decision making is a lot quicker, right? It's a founder and owner who either says a yes or a no, depending
Yeah.
on where they are on the technology curve. And once they say a yes, it's easy to get started because while we have a platform that caters to multiple use cases, um, um, they could very easily just get started with one of the modules,
Right.
immediate value, and then get started on the other modules.
Mm.
With larger firms, there is more engagement. They have in-house teams and leaders around areas like security, compliance,
Mm.
etc.
Mm. Mm.
So those questions also are a lot more detailed. But obviously, with larger firms, even if the sales cycle takes a bit longer, the volumes and scale
Mm.
compensates for
Mm.
that over time.
Mm. Mm. Well said. But the other question that I had was that how do you ensure accuracy, auditability, compliance, which are critical in such a highly regulated industry like wealth management?
Yeah, that's the big question. In fact, I've had instances where we had someone reach out, an RIA leader, and said, "Hey, guys, I want to talk to you." And my colleague and I excitedly got on the call. And instead of asking us about our product or our proposition, he had like a list of questions around compliance. Okay, he said,
Mm.
"I have these questions. Only if you tick the box for each of those will I even engage with you."
Mm.
So and for good reason, right? People are having very
Absolutely.
discussions about very sensitive topics. People are sharing a lot of private information.
Mm.
So advisors, from a regulatory standpoint, and also from the duty of care standpoint, they want to know how is that data treated, etc.
Mm.
So
Mm.
we go to extreme lengths to make sure it's all kind of secure and compliant. And actually, that's where coming from financial
Mm.
services and banking background helps,
Yeah.
right? The importance of that from day
Mm.
one.
Mm.
So a variety of things. I would say, a few things that we always talk about is how client data is never used to
Mm.
train any of the models. Um, every piece of data that is handled is encrypted in transit at rest, and also making sure that only authorized people have access to your
Mm.
data, and only you
Mm.
have data.
Mm.
You have access to data. So things like that, I think,
Mm.
make a big difference. I'd love to add to this. We did a webinar a couple of
Mm.
months back,
Mhm.
Ashutosh, where we said the topic of the webinar was how do you use AI
Mhm.
and how do you use AI compliantly,
Mhm.
right? And we said everyone who attends the webinar will get an 8-point checklist saying these are the 8 questions you can ask any
Mm.
technology service
Mm.
provider
Mm.
around compliance. Because I've had instances where RIA leaders and advisors have come to me and said, what should I even ask a
Mm.
technology service
Mm.
provider to
Yeah,
know that I'm covered, right?
correct.
And that really resonated with a lot of people.
Fascinating. Fascinating. And what would you say? One, of course, is this whole issue of compliance that a lot of people would want answers on. But are there any other barriers to adoption of your FastTrackr AI within the RIA system?
Yes, so I think an important thing to my point earlier, right? Going back to the history of the industry in some ways,
Mm.
if the advisory industry started booming or in the
Mm.
kind of 90s, early 2000s, the median age, the profile of the advisory population today is
Mm.
55.
Mm.
Right, so they will not be as tech forward as, say, the younger generations. So
Mm.
technology awareness, understanding is something that we have to overcome. We have to educate many
Mm.
of our clients, convince them that
Yeah.
this is good, this works securely, compliantly.
Mm.
The other thing, the nature of the industry is, if you look at the industry itself, right? How do advisors get new clients?
Mm.
The biggest channel is word of mouth and
Right.
referrals,
Yeah.
right? Even for them, like they might do events, they might do outreach, but the biggest channel for most folks, even today, is word of mouth.
Mm.
The
Correct.
same applies to who they work with as well. So I think the biggest thing is that trust factor. How do they know that you are someone that they can work with?
Mm.
How do they know that you are working with their peers, etc.
Mm.
So that is an important thing to overcome, especially for a young early stage company, right?
Correct. Correct.
And we've had to kind of go through the motions for that, be part of some of the largest industry events.
Mm.
The fact that I worked in the US for 8 years, some of my colleagues have done the same. We started opening doors with some of the RIAs through our warm
Yeah.
networks. um, we've partnered with several industry associations, So some of the largest associations in the US that advisors are part of. We are part of their catalog of products. So all of these things kind of make a big difference when you reach out saying that, hey, I'm FastTrackr, I'm used by several of your peers, and I'm also associated with some of these names that you will be familiar with. That
Very
makes a big
interesting.
difference.
Very interesting. Time for two more questions for you, Vineet. What
Sure.
does success look like for FastTrackr in the next few years?
Yeah. I think we're on a strong trajectory. The growth has been really good so far. But looking ahead, maybe 2-3 years, I would say we want to get into those thousands of users and RIAs across the country.
Mm,
Um, we want to be like uh, a set part of the team. My vision in many ways is, I'm building a platform where I'm saying that, hey, listen, if you have complex operational workflows that is today repetitive, grunt work, and hence error prone, instead of handing it over to another person of your team, hand it over to FastTrackr. So
mm,
being seen as an extension of their team would be massive. And for that, we have to be kind of comprehensive in terms of the number of use cases that we can meaningfully cater to, right? It should
mm,
meaningfully cover what they do today. And we're
mm,
already kind of getting there. We keep adding, we've added onboarding. We have a couple of interesting modules, down the pipe in the next couple of months coming
mm,
live as we get
mm,
into the new year.
mm.
So becoming more comprehensive, and obviously, numbers will follow that, right?
Yeah,
Market share,
absolutely.
revenues, etc.
Absolutely. No, I completely understand what you're saying because someone, a group of Israeli friends from Israel, actually created my digital twin based on all my writings, and that's becoming quite popular
Uh,
now. Ashutosh Garg AI. So I'm really enjoying my conversation with you, which leads me to my last question for you, which is what advice would you give experienced corporate leaders who want to transition into building AI-driven products?
this is the best time, I would say. Like we have this joke internally that uh, 40 is the new 20.
Yeah,
And I'll explain that. If you look at, Y Combinator and some of these largest,
yeah,
well-known accelerators or incubators,
yeah.
um, typically the founders who go in are in their early 20s, right? Who don't fear the world and they're kind of building products without any inhibitions, right? Which is
Mm,
great and which will continue to happen. But if you look at vertical AI and domain-specific AI, people with experience who understand the nuances, and these workflows are like really nuanced, and the edge cases are massive
mm,
in their own way. I think corporate leaders, people who've been in that business, who've seen this day in day out for 10, 15, 20 years, can realistically now build things that will optimize and change the way
mm,
these workflows work. So from that standpoint, I would encourage corporate leaders to try and look at what from their experience could be automated. And I don't think you have to look at AI as the uh, as something that will come and solve for everything, right? There is massive room for humans in the loop still,
correct.
as we are seeing in all the workflows that we're
Yeah,
automating as well.
yeah.
So the human element is important. Technology is at a much better place. And the good thing for experienced leaders is you can build proof of concepts, pretty quickly, and not necessarily even on your own. Obviously, there are
Mm,
tools that help
mm,
you do that,
mm,
but there are a
mm.
lot of people who can help you
Absolutely.
build some of these things as well. So the opportunity from that standpoint is there, and it's a lot easier to get off the ground um,
Correct.
than before.
Correct. Correct. And on
Yeah.
that note, Vineet, I just want to say what a fascinating conversation this one has been with you. You know, you had such an incredible journey, and you seem to have had your passion for entrepreneurship from a very, very young age. Thank you for talking to me about FastTrackr AI. I think AI is just pervaded every single aspect of our lives. And what you're doing for wealth management for the RIAs will probably, I'm sure, at some stage will become a wealth management tool for each one of us as individuals, where we
Yeah.
can probably use your tool as individuals to manage our own wealth without relying on the RIAs. Though I'm not sure if I'm making the right statement right now for Wealth Tracker. But thank you again for speaking to me and good luck to you.
Thank you, Ashutosh. I think we're very excited about the journey. Obviously, long, long way to go, but we're patient, we're resilient, we're building with a lot of
I'm sure.
ambition and energy. But thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure
Thank you.
today.
Thank you for listening to the brand called You Videocast and Podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.